Okay, so I suppose we should get started. Angela, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Perfect. My name is Christopher Hattlesey. I am the Communications Coordinator for Parkinson's Society Ontario. This is the Using Technology to Support Communications in Parkinson's Disease webinar presented by Dr. Angela Roberts. Angela earned her doctorate degree in Health and Rehabilitation Science and is a speech-language pathologist with more than 20 years of experience working with adults who have cognitive and communications impairments. The webinar will be around 45 minutes with time at the end for questions, so please save your questions for the end, which you can type in the bottom right corner. I will be recording this webinar and uploading it onto the website later next week. With that said, I will now turn it over to Angela.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks to everyone who is joining us this afternoon for a discussion on how to use technology to help both supplement and support communication in Parkinson's disease. I'll start off today with a bit of a definition of what communication is, and I've tried to direct this talk. I know we have a wide variety of audience members here today in terms of sophistication with technology and the topic, so I really have tried to direct this a bit of an entry-level talk. And we'll start with a definition of what communication is. Intuitively, communication really is an exchange of messages. But more than that, it's a mechanism in terms of how we establish, maintain, and change relationships. And communication can be both social-driven in terms of interaction and maintaining relationships, and also agenda-driven. The communication that simply says, I just want to know what you want for dinner. And so the types of technology that we use to support communication challenges in Parkinson's disease in part does relate to what the goal of the communication event is. The process of communicating in Parkinson's disease is complex, as it is for every individual. And we talk about these interactive processes in communication, meaning that within Parkinson's disease, challenges in speech and voice, language, cognition, and thinking skills all affect how well individuals with Parkinson's disease are able to communicate. When we look at the age group that people with Parkinson's disease in terms of that they typically come from, we also know that hearing and vision changes begin to occur, which can complicate some of the changes that we see in communication. You add on top of that challenges accessing the environment and mobility, and what you have is this very complicated interactive picture of how communication can break down in PD. We'll talk briefly about some of the cognition changes that can be seen in the language changes and speech changes, but really just as background for the types of devices and applications, computer software that may be useful for helping people with these challenges in PD. And some of the cognitive changes that we see even early on in Parkinson's disease include difficulty with attention and focus, particularly dividing attention between two different areas of focus, or being able to eliminate out the distractions from background noise, background distractions in order to focus on what's directly in front of you. Changes in planning, changes in organization can be seen early, and we generally call these aspects of executive functions. And we know that there are early changes in working memory as well, and that's the type of memory that we use to hold on to information and manipulate it so we can think about and plan, particularly in language, how we want to respond. Combined with early changes in visual perception skills, the cognitive picture in Parkinson's disease, while quite variable from individual to individual, is also quite complex. Language changes, and this is my particular area of research, we also know occur early in Parkinson's disease. And unlike some of our literature of old, we have this growing awareness that language changes not only occur early, but occur commonly in individuals who have Parkinson's disease. When we think about language changes, it's more than just finding words. It's how we use the rules of our given language to both put together what we want to say to someone else, but also to understand what is being said to us. And what we can see in PD, one of the most substantial complaints that individuals can have is just difficulty following conversations, trouble following the flow, particularly if it's a large group or there's multiple speakers. We can also see challenges in actually producing sentences in terms of more commonly making errors or having a more difficult time getting one's thoughts across. And we combine this with challenges in expressing emotions and feelings and thoughts through facial expression and body language. And we really do have this comprehensive picture of language changes in PD. Probably the most common complaint that we hear in folks with Parkinson's disease in terms of communication challenges. Again, the cognitive challenges and language challenges we know are common. We know they occur early, but they do tend to be more subtle, at least until we get to the middle stages of the disease for most folks. However, speech and voice changes are almost ubiquitous in Parkinson's disease, with about 90% of individuals reporting some change in their speech or their language, or speech or their voice. And these changes can be reduced loudness, changes in rate, either speeding up so much so that you trip over your sounds, or slowing down. Also changes to voice quality, so increased hoarseness and breathiness, and challenges making speech sounds as clear as you want to, such that people may often ask you to speak up, make yourself louder, or to repeat yourself. So the focus today really is on devices and technology, and I promise to not go down my typical path of exercises and conversation training as well. I'm going to stay focused today really on the device and technology component. But the use of devices and technology really is just one component of the options that we have for taking care of and managing some of the communication challenges that we have in PD. Exercise programs such as LSVT and newer programs that are coming out and being published are usually aimed at increasing voice volume and making the speech more clear. Therapy approaches like conversation training and group-based interventions can be used to support cognitive changes, language changes, as well as speech changes in Parkinson's disease. And then we really think about devices and technology as a supplement to these other aspects of therapy. How can we use voice amplifiers, computers, iPads, other tablet devices, smartphones, to really supplement the other options that we have to create an entire package of options for supporting communication in PD. Our toolbox, if you will, is quite full, and one of the most exciting aspects of research coming across in the last 10 years is that we continue to develop more and more resources for people with PD. So what is really the goal of technology? The goal of technology is, whether it's a device, whether it's a software application, is really to take the challenging task of communication and to support it and make it a little bit easier. And I'll give you some examples of technology use that have been around actually in terms of the speech language pathology field and the communication field for many, many years. Certainly the options that we have become more advanced in the last 5 to 10 years, but the use of technology to support communication has been part of the practice of speech language pathologists for decades, although we typically applied it in people who had had strokes, and more commonly we're seeing this extension of technology into other disorders such as PD. But currently, within the realm of options that we have, we think about technology along kind of 3 basic areas, and those include computer-based programs such as applications and software programs. And really, an app is just a very simple software program that's intended to take care of usually one specific task or a very specific function, and directed at more of a sense of mobile devices in terms of tablets or smartphones. What is coming along in our literature, especially in the world of Parkinson's disease, is the notion of actually delivering therapies via a computer. So actually removing the need to meet with a therapist face-to-face, and study of the efficacy of delivering therapy either through a television link, through a computer link, or even with use of virtual therapists, so actual computer-generated avatars that support therapy. And we're going to talk about some of those today. This is probably one of the largest areas of research in PD in the last few years in terms of the use of technology, and the data is actually quite supportive of the ability to deliver services for voice in particular and speech clarity via the computer as efficaciously as we can face-to-face. We think about aspects of social media such as Skype and Facebook and email that can help people to stay in touch with family members and friends and increase that social network, which is always beneficial for communication. The range of options that we have for computers has just exploded over the last decade in particular. And especially today, the real trend in technology is to go toward tablet devices such as Android-based devices or iPads and smartphones. That, while laptops once upon a time were our primary mainstay of technology to support communication, for the most part these days, the large focus is on applications used in tablets and smartphones. And then we still have the hardwired devices, those things that we talk about that we've used for years that aren't necessarily, may or may not be computer driven, but include things such as voice amplifiers, some of our more complex communication devices, speech generating devices, and I'll talk a bit about those today. A new technology called the Speech Vibe, which is one of those hot off the presses items. Those of you who know me know that I've been talking about this device for a couple of years now, and it has finally come to market in the US with about 5 clinics working with it now, and it is coming to Canada in November, and so I'll be sharing that with you today as well. Devices, though, don't always have to be complex, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Even something like a photo album, even a digital photo album that stores pictures of family members can be used as a communication device, can be used as a support for conversation. And so while we often tend to think about our technology options in communication being bound to things like tablets and smartphones, that's not necessarily the case. Our technology options can be low-tech and they can be high-tech. Even the use of a bell can be a device, in a way a technology device, that someone can use to draw someone into a room when they need assistance. It's low-tech, but if it works and it works in that situation, then that's the technology that's sufficient for the job. Computers are on the other end of the spectrum in terms of their complexity and the flexibility and what we're able to do with computers to support communication. But at the end of the day, the right device, the right technology to support communication typically is not a single device. It typically is multiple options, just like with therapy, that we need to support communication, some of which will be low-tech, some of which will be high-tech. The real key is to find the right device that does the job that needs to be done in that moment or as a whole in terms of supporting a certain aspect of communication. So I'll talk a little bit about the considerations that we need to be thinking about when we talk about adding technology to support communication. And again, for those of us in the speech-language pathology community and in the occupational therapy community who've been working with technology to support communication for many, many years, these aspects haven't changed. They've just become more complicated as the devices have become more complicated. But whenever we're thinking about which technology is best or what suite of technologies may be best to support communication, there's multiple variables that need to be considered. This truly is not a cookbook approach, meaning that one size does not fit all, and you often will need multiple options to fill the requirements that someone has. But we first need to consider vision and hearing and the sensory aspects of touch. For example, the type of device that we select or the type of technology we use, we need to make sure that people can see it. We need to make sure that they can hear any of the voice aspects or speech generating aspects from that device. and that their sensory system is intact enough to have the ability to touch the device and manipulate the controls on any device that we would use. This isn't just the person with Parkinson's, by the way. When we think about hearing in particular, it's important to make sure that, especially if it's a speech-generating device or a device that has speech output, that the person that you're communicating with, if that's your spouse or a friend or another family member, that they can actually hear that output. And I'll give you a great example of a case that I saw the other day where the gentleman I was working with needed a speech-generating device. He didn't have the ability to produce many words anymore. And so to relieve that burden, we were going to get a device, a computer device, that he could type in words and then it would speak for him. However, the issue was his partner had very poor hearing, to the point that she couldn't hear the device even when we had it turned up to maximum volume. So the solution, as we found, was to actually get her a hearing aid that would link wirelessly to the device that we were using for his communication. Not every device does that, which means we had to be very careful about the device that we picked. We had to work with the audiologist to both select the hearing aid for her and the device for him that would support their ability to communicate with one another. So this really wasn't a decision that this couple could have made on their own. They relied on the assistance of professionals, in this case myself and an audiologist, to help them make the decision as to which technology was best. Other considerations include just voice and speech accuracy and motor accuracy, again, for manipulating the controls. And in particular, if you're doing a voice-to-text application where